is a global feminist movement. And that was dominated largely by women from the West. And as African feminists, we were saying we have experiences in common, but we have experiences that are also different, right? Our feminism is about, trying to address the historical injustices that have been meted out to Africa politically and economically, as well as socially. As African feminists, we're born out of that process and out of that experience. And it's an experience largely, drawn in terms of race, in terms of geographical location.
Across generations and throughout regimes of patriarchy, colonialism, and capitalism, African women have boldly asserted their position as critical actors, dismantling structures of oppression, organizing for activism, and providing sought leadership to transform the lives of women and girls on the continent and globally. From the 15th to the 19th of November 2006, over 100 feminist activists from all over Africa and the diaspora met in Ghana's capital, Accra, to chart ways to strengthen and grow the feminist movement on the continent. At this forum, also named the African Feminist Forum, the activists sought to define and affirm their commitment to feminist principles, to guide analysis and practice. The forum adopted the Charter of Feminist Principles as a well-thought foundational guide for the identity and work of African feminists on the continent. With this charter, the African Feminist Forum reaffirms its commitment to dismantling patriarchy in all its manifestations in Africa and defend and respect the rights of all women without qualification. As African feminists, we politicize the struggle for women's rights, question the legitimacy of the structures that keep women subjugated, and develop tools for transformatory analysis and action. Our ideological task as feminists is to understand the system of patriarchy in African society, and our political task is to end it by investing individual and institutional energies in the struggle against all forms of patriarchal oppression and exploitation.
Africa now is very exploited in the world as just producers of primary products. We don't add value, they are extracted, taken over there, developed and sold back to us at 3 times, what was paid for. So there is a process of inequality there that we as African feminists are part of. We're also trying to dislodge the patriarchal systems that make this marginalization of Africa worse for African women. So that was one key element. The other key element was that we needed a tool that held us accountable to our movements. We needed a set of principles and frameworks that we could work to that made all of us as feminists who want to build this movement a set of principles that held us accountable and values that we can all aspire to and hold as central to what it is we're doing. So it's a very key tool. It's an organizing tool, it's an individual development tool, And it's a collective tool for accountability and holding the space. Many of us would say it's equivalent to a Bible.
Is it important to name yourself a feminist? For me, I would say yes. And the African Feminist Charter actually really talks about this. Naming ourselves as feminist is a political decision because feminism is rooted in political ideology, right? Because naming yourself that means that you are committing to the principles, to the ideology behind it, to the politics, to doing the work. And that's why I think it's important, right? Because when people know that I'm a feminist, so first of all, they know that there are certain conversations that I just will not take part in. And for me, that's also good, right? They know that there are certain spaces that I will not occupy because of my feminist politics. So you can name yourself whatever you want, but ultimately, if you are challenging the status quo, you have to know that there's going to be some sort of resistance. And it's not about the name, it's about the message.
All I can say, I can talk about the Uganda Council of Women subcommittee, which was elected to show that the status of women, because status of women is always lower, but most of what the main reason why the status of women is lower was through marriages. The status of women, we had to see that all marriages, suppose all marriages were registered, the status of women would be raised, and it would be possible to check on the men who are married in church, not to bring in to marry other women, and that women are not there. The status means you lose your status if you are just behind, you are just extra there. Yamufunira enyumba namuwongo, yamufunira enyumba namasaka egindi namugongo, and that kind of business for the sake of marriage, for the sake of society, stable society, and happiness of the family. We concentrated on that marriages must be registered. All marriages must be registered.
Is Western feminism dangerous to African women? As a young woman who was born in West Africa and has lived in South Africa for 13 years, the term feminism remains uncharted waters for many. It is rebellious, seen as taboo, and in my home country, Cameroon, it is a word that every mother hopes to never hear her daughter say, because it either means she hates men, men hate her, or she'll end up not getting married. But why? What does feminism mean to African women? Is feminism un-African? But most importantly, is feminism dangerous to the safety and empowerment of African women?
The world needs to know that being a feminist is not being a male hater. It's hating what patriarchy, which is mainly male privileges, does to women. So do I hate men for that? Maybe. But reminding ourselves also that women can also cause harm because of the patriarchal system in which we operate. So because now we know it better, we fight it better, we are visible better, and so part of resistance is to call us male haters. Personally, I was married for 46 years and I loved my husband, I love my son. I don't basically prefer to work with men because they want privileges even when they are in workplaces. Am I a male hater? No. I'm fighting against discrimination. So there is a misconception. And I think the young people who see feminism as a route for male hating, it's because they don't know the conceptual background, the theoretical reasons for why we do this work. Because no one likes to be beaten. So if I hate to be beaten, I'll hate a man who beats me. It's automatic. And so I think one of the things is that the younger people need to take courage to live out of the norm and say, I may not hate you, but I hate being beaten. And so for me, that's been my feminist journey. Each time I've been discriminated, mainly by male-headed, male exclusive institutions of work, I fought back.
The question of mentorship has been a very important political tool in the women's movement. Now, for me personally, I have come to change my own personal thoughts about mentorship. In the past, it's sort of presupposed that the young must learn from the older, and that the older must guide the young. And in that, there can be questions around power and how power is used over young people. I've come to see the question of mentorship as like I said, as a political tool, but not as a tool in which I, as the older feminist, walk the younger feminist through the road of feminism. I think every generation is born for the issues of its time, right? I think every generation is born for the issues of its time. Now, the issues of its time are about reflecting about the past, but also carrying the present, right? And making of the present what needs to be done in terms of your organizing. I, as an older person who is not on Twitter as much as younger people, who is not in the age of social media, there's no way I can negotiate that space for younger people, right? So I think it's very much an exchange. I think it's a dual process. I learn from younger women. I mean, the analysis that's being done, the feminist analysis that's being done by younger women now, is something that I learn from, you know? And I can only inject that in that, the benefit of my experience. But it's not about me walking young people. Young people, or the feminists younger than I do, have their own paths to walk. The point is, you know, in a sense, we're part of the same movement. We can't afford the luxuries of thinking that we're somehow separate, right? Because the odds are stacked against us now. I mean, the issues that young people have to deal with now are really complex.
Did I ever see myself as a feminist or doing this work? In some ways, mostly because, one, I am a Black African woman, and the more you are aware of what that means for you in you know, the global space and otherwise, the more I feel like you have no real option but to take up space and to actively work towards dismantling the things that oppress you. So it began really as a personal journey, and then I fully understood that there is no liberation without community, and that, you know, you can't just liberate yourself. And so that's how I began to do the work in the ways that I do it. No, because I don't know that you can plan these things out when you are much younger and unaware of all the complications of the world. So I guess in many ways, feminism, as corny as it sounds, found me. When I think about feminists in Uganda, particularly feminists on Twitter who have really contributed to mainstreaming our understanding of feminism, at least people of our generation, right? I would like to believe that we forced traditional media actually to consider the digital space as important, right? I think that we were one of the key players that began to think and talk about issues that weren't in the mainstream, such as feminism, online. In terms of whether we can dismantle the patriarchy using the internet, yes and no, right? It's a systemic issue that requires more than one actions, right? But I don't think that the actions that we have taken on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and all the spaces that we occupy should be taken for granted, because firstly, they are responsible for mainstreaming the feminist conversation as it is right now in this country, right? I think that we have really contributed, and by we I mean young feminists who took this conversation on Twitter and on Facebook. We have really contributed to mainstreaming, to shaping narratives, to challenging narratives, right? You have people who call out manos, and you have people who call out sexism on the media, on social media. But it's also not just social media, because we don't only exist in that space. And I feel like a lot of people sometimes mistake Twitter activism for being just that. In of itself, that's enough, but it's not the only space, because we're multifaceted human beings, right? And we exist in multiple spaces. The digital space is just one of those, but we do a lot of offline work as well, and all of it is interconnected.
Is there any added value to older women being in the women's movement? I think there is great value. First of all, knowing the history of where you came from is important, and it's actually the older women are like the ones who are holding the history. Although the methods have changed, still it's a collective. There is no way older women can say we are the only ones, or younger women can say we are the young ones. Yes, online has been imposed by the environment, but you know, when people see numbers, human numbers on the street, it had impact. We used to work for every cause and any cause, and the following day it was in the news. Now you are online, you are the only ones who know, those of you who are online with each other. So there has to be a way of keeping the old methods plus the people who use the old methods, both for learning, because also feminist movement is a learning space. What do the older women learn from the younger women? What do the younger women learn from the older women? So there is no generation that can say, we can do it alone. Together, we can.
So I have an example. It is in the book I have there of Miss Eiley Tripp. Miss Eiley Tripp, that is over there, Women in Politics in Uganda. And in it, she mentioned, which I had also mentioned in my drafts. All those are drafts, but they had to condense into a smaller volume. Now, Pumla Sosonkole, she's mentioned as one of the first to be governor appointed in the legislative council before independence. The parliament, the body that made legislations, was legislative council, as you may know. If you read more about this yourselves, and to know what happened before independence. And she had been to United Nations also for meetings. She's very, very selfless, and she wanted as many more women to come up. She gives an example, and Eiley Tripp quotes it, that when you open a door, leave your foot there so that other women may come. Don't close that door. When you open, become educated, become privileged, don't close that door. Leave it there, open, so that more will come in through that door.
Speaking for myself, in my own personal journey, I have been so fortunate and so blessed to have been, supported and loved by so many women. Of course, starting with my mother, my grandmother, my aunts. I have so many cousins that even if I haven't spoken to them for years, because we're all over the world now, even if I haven't spoken, when I call, they're there for me, and I'm also there for them. In my own career, in my own learning, had it not been for women like, I can name a few who are so important to me, Sylvia Tamale, older women, Sarah Antiro, Rhoda Kalema, my own mother, Sarah Nangenda. people and other African sisters, I could name many, I could go through so many, who have both inspired me, who have challenged me, who have supported me, and who have nurtured me. But I want to pay homage to all of those and to say and to testify that were it not for women, for African women, and for African, gender non-conforming persons in my life who have challenged me, who have, taught me what compassion looks and feels like, what acceptance looks and feels like, what celebration looks and feels like, the examples that they have set and continue to set. This world would have just been a grey place for me.
First of all, I should thank you that I'm looked at in that light. That I'm an icon. That I've become the woman I've become. I've become a woman I am. I must say, it's all this natural to me. I think it's natural to me. I don't know, I don't really force myself, but I feel it's an obligation to interact, to see where there's a problem, to see where there's a need. And I must say, in 1958, 59, I was wooed into women's programs by the lady who have already gone. You see Mrs. Brown in the book. Those women you see, I mentioned quite a number of women in that book who mentored me. They didn't sit me in class, but once I was pulled in what they were doing, to carry out, for them it was a challenge to pull other women up. Not a privilege to be educated, to be high up, but a challenge. They wanted other women to be the same as them. And in Rebecca Molina makes it clear when you read, that's why I quote those 3 women in this particular, because without sitting, meaning in a sitting room, say, Rhoda, you should do this, you should follow this. I saw what they were doing. I saw how they were, how committed they were. And because I was working with them, I was just absorbed in the atmosphere of serving others.